Today we're going to talk about the Vermont, which got a buff in this update. You'll notice, though, right off the bat, that we are at the tail end of a match. There's about 2 minutes left. We've done 196,000 damage. Why am I showing you this? Well, for one reason in particular. There's a single enemy destroyer left. And this match, I didn't want to show you the whole thing because it's a very boring match up until this point. There's not a lot happening. It's not very dynamic. Essentially, we just sit in one place for the entirety of it and rack up all this damage. The reason I wanted to show you this little clip is because of the Jutland here. The thing about the Vermont is it's not exactly a great ship, but it's got great guns that do incredible damage against pretty much anything, destroyers included. If we had had that fourth turret loaded and fired it at the same time, we might have even dev-struck that Jutland. But we finished this match with that great hit against the enemy destroyer, doing 210,000 damage and 3,400 base XP. Pretty good numbers in both cases, but again, this was not a very dynamic match. We sat in one place, we did all that damage, and then we ended it with that kill on the destroyer. Bit of a boring blowout. This match, however, we're going to do the exact same amount of damage, plus or minus a couple points. It's going to be 210,000, but it's going to be a much more dynamic match, and so it should be a little bit more interesting to watch. I felt like the other one there was sort of like watching paint dry if I were going to try to make a video out of it. Anyway, the buff to the Vermont, we should talk about that. Two things were changed. The most crucial thing is the main battery AP shell damage. Originally, when the Vermont debuted, the main battery AP shell damage was 14,200. It's now been buffed to 15k even. And the main battery reload, which was 36 seconds, has been reduced to 35. Now you'll notice when we fire our main battery guns for the first time that our reload is 29 seconds. That's because we've got the Hoshino commander at the helm. And one of the skills, Megalomania, which is most often found on the French battleship commanders, massively reduces the reload time at the cost of some HP. I believe the Vermont has 107,000 HP normally, but because of that skill, we're at 97,000. So we give up a little bit of survivability in order to get this decreased reload. There are a couple different ways you could go on the build, of course. Azerlane, New Jersey would be probably pretty good, buffing the damage numbers of the AP even more than they already have been. Or you could use a free-to-play commander like William Sims. I'm sure that would work out just fine. But we've got Hoshino for a bit of a shorter reload. You could also use, I suppose, Azerlane, Colorado and achieve similar results, but Hoshino is the one that I wanted to go with. Having a 29-second reload on guns like this just feels kind of dirty. And now that they do 15,000 damage, well, they're much more in line with for what you would expect for an American battleship that has 18-inch guns. We've got two other examples in the game, of course, those being the Georgia and the Ohio. Each of them has essentially the same 457mm guns. I don't know that they're the exact same guns as those on the Vermont, but they are the same size. And on the Ohio and Georgia, their AP does a maximum damage of 15,750. So we're 750 points of damage short on the Vermont, but we have 12 guns compared to the Ohio's 8 or the Georgia's 6. So I think in the end, it feels pretty good. It feels pretty similar. It all sort of evens out, I would say, after the buff. And of course, if you wanted to put on Azerlane, New Jersey, or you wanted to run even somebody like William Sims with gyrating drill bits, there are ways to buff the damage numbers of the AP shells and send them into the stratosphere. Vermont doesn't have the highest AP alpha in the game, but it does have the second highest now. Yamato's is still under 15,000. And Georgia and Ohio at 15.750K. Those are the highest. This would be the second. And we're going to deal some pretty impressive damage as this battle goes on. We've sort of pushed out here to this flank. We've found the Minotaur, and there's our first good hit of the game with 2 citadels right through the front of that guy for a devastating strike and up to 55,000 damage. Most of the enemy team is on the other side of the map. This side is fairly weak, but we do have a full health Montana pushing in, and I think there's at least one other cruiser. Nevertheless, as we get closer very slowly to this Montana, we're going to shoot at the other Montana out there and see if we can't get any good hits in. Stalingrad is another potential target, but he keeps going dark. So we continue to push in to this flank toward the other Montana, sending the front guns across the map once more. I don't think the results are going to be spectacular, but as we push in, we find that we're pretty close to the enemy Montana, within 11 kilometers. It's maybe not something you want to do with the Vermont right away regularly, but as you can see, our team is dropping like flies. We've lost 4 blue ships to the enemy's 2, and so something needs to happen to turn things around. The cruiser in front of us loses his smoke screen, but we go in front of him to block the Montana's salvo. We take quite a bit of damage from it, but the Montana gets hurt a lot worse than we do. There's another 2 citadels, and keep in mind, every one of these citadels is doing 15,000 damage. So 2 of them is 30k, and that was well over 30k on the enemy Montana. He's turning away now. He was at pretty much pristine full health. Now he's not, and he's going to beach himself on the island. The follow-up salvo is decent, at least. It's about 6,000 damage. Could have been better. But Montana is at least approaching the exit to go back to port. We've got Holland pushing into the center of the map, spotted by the radar cruiser near our cap. We're turning our guns now. We know Montana is going to go down quite quickly. Shouldn't take more than a salvo or 2 to finish him off once we reacquire vision. But the Holland pushing toward our base is a bit of a concern. We want to stop him from entering the base. We managed to hit with only 1 shell. I don't know if the other battleship next to us was more successful or not, and I'm not exactly sure why or how the Holland is spotted now. Maybe he's caught by the sonar of that friendly cruiser over there. In any case, he gets taken down by the Worcester, so that eliminates the only enemy destroyer on the team, or the only one left. We still have a destroyer left, and now the kill count is even. It was looking a little bit hairy there for a second, but I think we have a fighting chance, and there's still 8 minutes left to go in this battle, so plenty of time. Stalingrad reversing from behind the island there, slightly angled, debating on if I wanted to shoot or not. Ultimately, we elect to do so, and I don't think the results are going to be very good. These shells are just going to bounce off Stalingrad's ridiculous armor. But, of course, we didn't get spotted. We're not in a position where anybody's got line of sight on us, and somehow the enemy Montana over on that other side of the map went down. I must have missed it. Maybe it was our other battleship teammate. Speaking of Montanas, though, we've got the broadside of the second one. He's way far out there at 19 kilometers. Sometimes with the Vermont, it is tricky to make these long-range shots. They do take a long time to reach the target, the shells that is, but when they hit, they do some very nice damage. And because they're so floaty, if somebody's paying attention and they're in something that's maybe a little faster or maneuvering a little better than simply reversing, it's not all that hard to dodge incoming Vermont salvos. We're going to try to finish off the Montana here. We've got an enemy cruiser approaching from behind. It's a Michelangelo. We're not quite as worried about him as we are the ships on the other side of the map, who really only have our destroyer and cruiser to go through. And of course, one of them is the Stalingrad, which is a radar cruiser. I think our destroyer might be actually smoked up in front of him, which is not the best sign in the world. If he gets radared, he could be in big trouble. He's got no support, aside from maybe us, if we can get shots on the Stalingrad, who is broadside behind that island. The salvo is out as Stalin continues forward. We lose vision of him, but do we get some hits? Yes, we're up to 150,000 damage done now, so not exactly the most impressive hits, but Stalingrad is on low HP. He did manage to sink our friendly destroyer as we feared, so it's too late to help that guy out. Stalingrad is going to retreat, but Worcester is still hanging around in that area of the map, I think hoping to reacquire vision of some of the ships. And at some point, we should be seeing that Michelangelo. There he is, pushing in. And this isn't your run-of-the-mill Johnny Potato Michelangelo. This guy clearly has some knowledge of strategery and tactics. We're going to take a shot at him as he tries to push between those two islands closer to our friendly Yamato. Of course, he goes dark there, but as soon as we shoot and he's aware that he can get shot by us, you'll see that he's not gonna go through that gap in the islands to go at the Yamato now that he knows it's not a 1v1. Instead, he's gonna go around that island and put it between himself and us so that he's only fighting the Yamato. But the Yamato is gonna be able to deal with him quite effectively, I think, if memory serves me right. We're trying to see if we can get another salvo. We're so confident that we can because we think he's going to push through the gap that we launch the spotter plane up into the air, but he decides not to push through the gap. He's going to go around it and go behind that island. I think he's trying to launch torpedoes at the friendly Yamato, but he's putting himself in a position where we simply can't hit him. Do his torpedoes make contact with the Yamato? If they do a lot of damage. And I guess we'll never know because we look away. But Yamato takes him down. GG to him. That leaves only the Stalingrad and one last enemy battleship. Stalingrad is somewhat broadside to our position behind the island. And we get another good salvo, taking our damage done up to 167,000. Stalingrad's on low HP. Worcester, with a little bit of farming, should be able to finish that guy off. And that just leaves the Republique, who I guess spent the entirety of the last half of this game touring the map border. He's finished with his little safari, and now he's coming back into the action. Of course, he's giving mostly broadside to us. We still have 58,000 HP left, so I'm not super worried about him doing a lot of damage. I just want to get all my guns on target, and we do, netting ourselves the high caliber medal and dealing another impressive blow to the Republique's HP pool. We're going to try it one more time. I was pretty confident that a second salvo would spell the demise of the Republique, but you never know, even with something like the Vermont, which does, I think, have very reliable guns that hit very hard. Not hard enough. 6 shatters there, I think, on the Republique's torpedo protection. But the Worcester's farming him the whole time, and one more salvo should do it. Reason I wanted to show you this game instead of the first one, even though we had pretty good damage in XP, is because we moved around a lot more than in this one. It was a bit more dynamic. We nearly get the kill on the Republique there, but we finished with 210,000 damage. And so as you can see, now that the Vermont is buffed, you can get a lot of damage out of these guns. They're performing the way that I would have hoped they performed when the ship first debuted. I think they've got this thing in a pretty good place now. It can deal a lot of damage, and as you can tell by these sort of 2 little clips put together, it can do it on a pretty consistent basis. I've gotten several 200,000 damage games in Vermont, and a lot in the 160, 170, 180, or even 190 range. This thing does damage now. It might not be a good ship. It's still a slow and thick thing, huge target, but the guns are fantastic. Hope you enjoyed the video. If so, give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.